What's good, people? It's time for another Magic Man review. This one's a really good one. It was on my Amazon wish list for quite a while, maybe a couple years. I couldn't find it at the library, so I said, you know what, might as well pull the trigger on this one, and I didn't. I don't have any regrets about it. It was a really good book. It was very informative. It's called Embracing Defeat by John W. Dower. And this is about the Japan in the wake of World War II. This is what happened to the Japanese after they were defeated in the Second World War. It's really good. Won a Pulitzer Prize. Those of you who don't know about the Pulitzer Prize, look up look it up in the search engine. Go to Wikipedia or something like that. And it's all about his Pulitzer's regret about yellow journalism that got America involved in the Spanish-American War, and how bad he felt because people were coming home, veterans were coming home, disabled or in caskets, and he felt bad about it. So he came out with the Pulitzer Prize. Funny stuff. It's crazy sometimes, Humans are going to human. They're going to do all kinds of wacky stuff. You just don't know about these people. But there was a lot of good things in this book. Now, a lot of times, books like these, especially if they win Pulitzer Prizes, they're from a leftist point of view. And when I mean a leftist point of view, I mean they really kind of softball like Marxism, communism, or any kind of socialism. They're collectivists. They have a collectivist mindset. And you will find this in most books like this, and it has the baby boomer narrative to it. Now, the baby boomer narrative is going out the window now because all the baby boomers are dying out. But the narrative has been embraced by a lot of younger people, and they had this narrative that was given to them through the schools and stuff like that, through the media, about certain things that people should look up to or aspire to. It's in this book. But to be fair, the author was very fair, especially when it came about the Soviet Union. But let's get into it. In this book, it just goes how human the Japanese were. It doesn't get into a whole lot about the atrocities that the Japanese committed in the Second World War. And you have to remember this. A lot of people think the Second World War started when Germany invaded Poland. That's not true. The Second World War for the Japanese and the Chinese was started in 1937 or earlier, because they were fighting the Chinese during that time. But the Americans came in there and they subdued the Japanese. They gave them three things: sex, sports, and the screen. So they would have their own little version of bread and circuses to distract the masses. And these people were starving to death. They were pretty bad off. Their cities have been firebombed and all kinds of nasty stuff. People is like, oh, well, you dropped the atom bombs on Japan. That's nothing compared to firebombing a whole city to the ground. Which would you rather have? Be at the center of an atom bomb that goes off and your microwave evaporated, disintegrated in less than a second? Or would you rather be firebombed? I'm taking the A-bomb. Just me, personally. Let me see. But you can kind of see in this book how the Japanese acted after the war was lost. Its history repeats itself again and again and again. And it humanizes them to a great deal, because you read the book, and if you know about all the things, the nasty things the Japanese did during the Second World War, he's like, man, well, they had it coming. The little old ladies and kids, they didn't have it coming. They weren't out there, sticking people with a bayonet. One of the things he points out here, that one of the famous films the Japanese loved during this time, it had just come out in the movie theater. It was one of the, in its time, it was one of the most renowned movies in the world. It was Gone with the Wind. And the Japanese could really relate to that, because Gone with the Wind was how the old society in the South was gone with the wind with the war. All the plantations were burned down, people were starving to death, and the Japanese could relate to that because that's the same situation they were in, or had just gotten out of. They were starving to death, all their cities have been firebombed, and they really related to that. So it kind of gets a kind of mindset if you think about it, because Gone with the Wind, they kind of whitewashes slavery too, and the Japanese, they kind of tried to forget that they had done so much nasty stuff throughout Asia. As humans are going to human. And there's another really good quote here. It says, "The only truth in the press is in the obituaries." That's crazy. I love stuff like that, you know? Because I'm cynical and a contrarian, and when I read stuff like that, I'm like, yeah, I gotta pick that up. I'm gonna quote that, put that in my little quotes book. They misread a lot of this. A book goes over Hirohito and how the Americans felt the Japanese really adored them. But a lot of the Japanese, especially some of the soldiers and the sailors who came back, and like their whole units have been wiped out, and they were like the sole survivor. And it's like, why did all my friends die? How come the emperor can't take responsibility? He should have taken responsibility, even though he was kind of like a puppet to the military. But you'll read in this book how MacArthur and the emperor were kind of like this. MacArthur read it wrong. They could have gotten rid of the emperor. The Japanese would not have been, some of the more conservative Japanese, they would have gotten a little bit pissed off that the emperor was gone. But the country's been occupied. Your people are starving to death. What are you going to do? And a lot of the Japanese blamed the emperor for losing the war. Like, you signed off on this. The military could not have done anything without your approval. Alright, let's see. There's a lot of hypocrisy in this book. It points out the hypocrisy that the Americans and the Japanese colluded together. When they had the hypocrisy really comes forth in the Tokyo War trials, when they took all the military, the Tojo, and a lot of the generals, the Japanese military, the Japanese police, how they had exterminated people, and how they used people for medical experiments, and all kinds of horrible stuff they did. Japanese were effed up in World War II. They were cutting people's heads off for fun. They thought it was something to fun. And they took pictures of people, you know, hey, look how many heads I cut off today. And they were messed up. The National Socialists, they were pikers compared to the Japanese. Really. You see some of the stuff the Japanese did. It was crazy. But a lot of there was this one Indian jurist from the British Empire, the British Raj, who was sitting on the Japanese Tokyo War criminal trials. And he was pointing out the hypocrisy. There was like, how can you be condemning these people? There are no there are no international laws that they broke. And even if they did break them, you guys, the British, the Dutch, the Americans, and the Russians, you all doing the same thing. It was crazy, the hypocrisy. And as soon as the war, even as the war trials were going on, because the Japanese had been pushed out of, like, you know, Hong Kong, and the Dutch East Indies, and French Indochina, and the Russians, they were taking over Manchuria, and northern part of Korea. It's like, you guys are doing the same thing. You're clawing back your old empire. You know, your old imperial possessions. And the Japanese are like, hey, how can you really pass blame and pass judgment on us for creating our own empire when you're out there clawing back your old imperial possessions? It's funny. It's just crazy. There's one thing one of the things I learned from this book. Was the Japanese perspective on the Second World War. They thought it was like an unholy war. They believed it too. So you can't say they brainwashed the people into believing this, but they just wanted to kick the white people out, the Europeans out of Asia and rule it themselves. They want Korea to belong to them, Manchuria or Manchukuo, where the hell they were calling it, China, Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Philippines. They didn't want the Europeans in there, or the Americans, ruling it as their little colony possessions. They wanted all to themselves. They wanted to be the top dog Asian in Asia. And they were also thinking about the anti-Japanese boycotts in China, about the chaos that was happening in China. A lot of people don't know about the warlordism that happens in China sometimes, where parts of Chinese society will go at each other's throats based on ethnicity. They're not all Mandarin. Where they don't all speak Mandarin. You know, they got different ethnicities within China. They get lumped in with Han Chinese. And they were anti-communist too. Tojo's like, you guys messed up. We were willing to make a deal with you, Americans, but you firebombed the whole country and destroyed everything. Now we can't act as a bulwark against the communists because we were fighting the communists too. At the same time, they had made a non-aggression pact with the communists. So much hypocrisy in this book. It points it out. It's not the author, but there's so much hypocrisy that goes on. We were shipping armaments to Vladivostok in Russia while we were fighting the Japanese, and the Japanese would not sink our Liberty ships going and giving supplies to the Russians because they didn't want to break their non-aggression pact with the Russians, because then they would have to fight the Russians. But the Russians broke that pact. They broke that pact. That's what really one of the reasons that the Japanese lost the war is because the Soviet Union broke their non-aggression pact with Japan. People think it was just because of the atom bomb. No, it was the Russian army coming in from the north. The hypocrisy of this of what goes on. It was just greed, really. They asked Tojo, they was like, hey man, you think we're ever going to get rid of war? Can we have this peaceful society, this democratic society that, you know, we're aspiring to? It's like the Americans don't even aspire to themselves. They don't practice this. It says you're not going to get war unless you get rid of greed. And it says you're not going to get rid of it. Humans are going to human. And he's right. He might have been a prick, but he was right. We still got wars today. People all want, you know, money and power. If you gotta understand this stuff, human nature doesn't change, people. It really doesn't. But this was a really good book. I waited a little while to get it. I knew a lot of stuff in here already. But if you don't know anything about Japan, and I've lived in Japan, and great people. If I had the money, I'd move to Japan. It's a lot cleaner, you know, like a lot nicer. The people are more civil. They're more civilized people as compared to the United States. And, you know, we get off the chain sometimes here in the States. Over there, they don't mess around. I was looking at a program a while back, I caught a glimpse of it, or I read something in the headlines like they had to fire and lay off cops in Japan because they don't have any crime. Cops have nothing to do. I like to have those kinds of problems, you know? We gotta lay off the cops because we don't have enough criminals to justify having all these cops. But at the same time, if you read this book, it has to be in the back of your head, all this crazy stuff that the Japanese did. Like, I had one of my gunnery sergeants. I said, hey, Gunny, guess what? Got my orders. I'm going to Japan. He's like, man, F the Japanese. I can't stand them, blah, blah, blah. He hated the Japanese. And he was from Guam, right? I said, why do you hate the Japanese so much? They beheaded my uncle in the Second World War. It's like, F the people. If it had been up to people like him, my gunnery sergeant, they kept on dropping atom bombs on there. They would have exterminated the Japanese. That's how much people in Asia hated the Japanese for what they did during the Second World War. So I always hear stuff like, oh, you dropped the atom bombs, Japanese. If it had been up to the Chinese or the people in Guam or the Filipinos or the Koreans, they would have exterminated the Japanese if they had the chance, because of all the messed up stuff that the Japanese did. Go and read some of the stuff on the history of Japan during the Second World War. It's just crazy. But at the same time, it brings out the human section. You kind of feel bad for them because they're starving to death. They paid a heavy price for the things they did in the Second World War. All their cities firebombed to the ground. 2 atom bombs. Prisoners of war being used as slaves for years afterwards. People didn't even know where their kids were at, where their husbands were at, where their brothers, where their fathers, and they just got left on little islands all over the place in the Pacific. It was crazy. But I'm rambling on. You should really read this book. This one's not going to the library. I'm not donating this book. This one's going to my bookshelf. It's a good one. And I suggest you read it. Embracing Defeat by John Dower, Japan in the Wake of the World War II. Now, if you like these videos, Make sure to subscribe and hit the like button. Until next time, people.